Former RedWing Brendan Shanahan, he's the guy doling out the suspensions this year, and it seems evident that the National Hockey League is really making it clear that you're going to pay dearly for a shot to the head. Your thoughts about the suspensions so far in the preseason? A lot of players are going to be missing a lot of money and a lot of games to start the season.
Well, it's something that we had to address. There's too many players getting injured. Is it just because the speed of the game now is unbelievable, and speed of the game is the size. The players are much bigger now, so something has to be addressed. And do you agree with it or don't agree that something had to be rectified? And so Shanny has kind of laid down the law, and sometimes to get to where you want to be, maybe you got to go too far one way. But I think we're getting to the right spot. But you can sit and watch all these hits, and you can see it live, and you can say right away it's a suspension. All of a sudden you go to a video replay and you look at it and you say, maybe it isn't. Every hit has got a fine line to it, and there's really they're not black and white. There's a few that are black and white, but most of them you could say, yeah, it's a 5-game suspension, or you could say, it's a good hit. So Shanny's got a tough job, but it's something that has to be rectified, and they're doing the best job they can with it.
Question for Ken. Frank Garza with Latino Press. Ken, you were talking about retooling and rebuilding the team, but what about Joe Louis Arena? How long can Joe Louis Arena survive in the NHL before it has to be replaced?
Well, we're not the oldest building in the league. I mean, obviously the Islanders have an older building. I mean, you might think our Mr. Elch that came out the other day, I think in an interview with the columnist, didn't he? He said that he's going to build a building. He didn't put a time frame and didn't say anything. I think our owners want a new building. Obviously, anytime you're talking about money of that significance, there's a lot to making it all happen. So I'm assuming that they're going through Mr. and Ms. Elch are going through the process.
During our playoff preview last year, we talked a little bit about a couple things. Number one, the lack of right-handed shots on the team, and is it helping, hurting, or does it make any difference? And the other thing is, we just don't seem to have the stud scorer that's doing the 40 goals a year. Is there something in the works on all that?
I wish there was a hockey store where I could go down and I could buy that 40 goal store. The problem is there's 29 teams in the league. I would say to you, just watch what's going on around the NHL. And I guess I'm getting back to why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. Duncan Keith's on a 13-year contract. Brent Seabrook just signed a 5 or 6 or 7-year contract on defense. And Patrick Sharp just signed a 5-year contract in Chicago. I'm going to go to Chicago. Jonathan Toews is on a 5-year contract. Patrick Kane's on a 5-year contract. Teams are locking up their best players. So the days, I guess we have no financial advantage, zero. There's going to be probably out of the cap 64.5, within $5 million of the cap. The Columbus Blue Jackets have more. We're trying to position ourselves for exactly what you're saying. Is it going to happen? I don't know. The problem is everybody's locking their best young players. So ultimately, we got to draft, we got to develop, and we got to go through a process to try to figure out a way to stay competitive. And in the meantime, we got to be financially flexible so that a player that you're talking about becomes available via trade or via free agency, we can get into the game. But if none of those types of players you're talking about ever become available, we got to find an alternative. If we're just going to sit around here, what we've talked about, our scouts did an incredible job in finding Datsuk and Zetterberg in the 6th and 7th rounds. That's lightning in a bottle. We can't wait for lightning in a bottle again to happen. That's once in our lifetime that you're going to find 2 players. We got 2 of the best forwards in the game that were drafted in the 6th and 7th round on the same team in the National Hockey League. That's great scouting by our, but there's luck involved. So we can't sit around waiting for the next lucky thing to happen. We got to have a plan, and when you're drafting 18-year-old kids, and we're drafting the 25th kid in the draft, and then we're drafting the 55th kid in the draft, and then we're drafting the 85th kid in the draft. This is a long, slow, patient process that we started in 05. and they're coming. But you know, we think that Henrik Zetterberg and Pavel Datsuk, one guy's 33, one guy's 30. I mean, I think I'm lucky. I get to go to 82 games a year, and I get to watch one of the best defensemen in the history of the National Hockey League on an every night basis. And I get to watch, in my opinion, the most exciting forward in the world today in Pavel Datsuk. Like, I'm lucky. So I'm not as much worried about what I don't have. I think we got a good team. I think we got an exciting team. I think we got an entertaining team. And we've had a 20-year run. Can we keep it going? How can we keep it going? That's what we've been hired to do. We're trying to go through a process. There is no quick fixes, because the problem is there's 29 teams. You know, in the old days, we could go out, we could be aggressive, and we could have a press conference for Luke Robitaille and acquired Chris Chelios, and signed Brett Hull and Darian Hatcher, and acquired Dominic Hasek. And then, you know, in 2004, we played Nashville in the playoffs. We had a $75 million payroll. They had a $25 million payroll. So we'd go on July 1st and we'd start to spend. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. We're one of 30 teams. We have, what's our advantages? Our fan base and our history and our tradition, our ownership, and we hope that we're well managed and we're well coached, and that somebody wants to come join us. And if we take care of business day after day after day after day, one day Marian Hossa decides he wants to come to Detroit for a year, or 2 or 3 or 4. So I think that's the plan. There are no quick fixes. We got to have a plan. We got to stick to it. We got to draft. We got to develop, and we got to be, again, like I said, we got to be streamlined with cap space for the flexibility to get into whatever opportunity might arise.
You know, just to address that a little bit also is, we've kind of analyzed, you know, what kind of the winning formula, what we think it is, and the big thing to be successful in the NHL nowadays is to have depth. And we think we have some of the best depth in the league. And when you're going to have depth, a lot of times you're not going to have, you might have some 40 goal scorers, but they're not going to play enough to get 40 goals. You know, we got Johan France, and he can be a 35, 40 goal scorer, but we believe in having depth. You look at a lot of these teams that have 40 goal scorers, those guys are playing every second shift. They're out there every power play. We like to spread it out over 3 lines, 4 lines, and I think that's one of the reasons we have so much success, is just because we have more depth than most teams. So a lot of times we have those scorers, Johan France and Zetterberg, Datsuk, but we believe in throwing those 3, 4 lines out there, and that just changes the ice time and the power play time a lot of times.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Tommy Morris with Detroit City TV. You know, it's going to be a long year addressing the rules changes for hits. Not the rule changes, but the suspensions, the calls. Many people after the first week, including some of the players that have already played, have already expressed that you may be giving more, the referees may become more involved, not really a clear definition of head hits, because of the game it's that fast. And just after coming out of the clutch and grab, is it a possibility that could happen this year? And second of all, has there been any address to the equipment? I mean, we have elbow pads that are cast, and if you notice any of the hits, it's quite obvious that if you have a 5'9" player going against a 6'4" defenseman, that elbow is already in the chops. And short of putting a full face shield on, wouldn't the obvious solution maybe to stop the football shoulder pads with these fast players on the ice, as well as a cast on the elbow pads?
I'll touch on the rules. I promised I wouldn't talk about Bettman, so I'll talk about Shanny. So for those of you here last year. I think the one thing that everybody's forgetting is that the same guy, Brendan Shanahan, who's handing out the suspensions now, is the same guy who was involved in the rule changes. And no one seems to mention the fact that, you know, it's a physical game. And if you imagine you took out the blocking and the picking in football, what would happen to the quarterbacks and the guys, you know, getting the ball? So the fact that, you know, you can't interfere anymore, you can't hold up for your partner when he gets the puck. The games, definitely guys are bigger and faster.